have let go of, I don't know what I've let go of in all my years, and I have no regrets. None. In fact, I can't even think of some of the stuff I let go of until I see it at a garage sale or somebody else's house. Oh, I used to have one of those. But I don't have any regret, and there's a way of doing that. And I find that we talked about the difference between downsizing and decluttering, that if you start with the decluttering piece, that is getting rid of the stuff you're not using and doesn't bring you any joy, it's important. And we talked a bit earlier about why it's important to start downsizing before you even know where you're going. And my feeling is, as soon as you have the thought that you're going to change and move and reduce your living quarters, you should be downsizing, because it can take a year, but it's basic physics. Now, I love about mathematics, but physics, there's a great commercial on TV. A body at rest tends to stay at rest, but a body in motion tends to stay in motion.
Newtonian mechanics, yes. Exactly.
So once you start letting go of expired things and out-of-date things and ratty kitchen towels and burned plastic spatulas and magazines that are 3 years old and moldy that have been in the corner of the basement.
But Diana, it was Diana's death, you know.
Well, then you hold on to that for a little longer and you get rid of all the rest.
Okay.
The things
so pick the top parts.
Right. You put aside anything that's tough. Your job is quantity at the beginning. You want to double your trash and recyclables. You want to start eating up your pantries. You want to go through your freezer, get rid of freezer-burned food. You get rid of anything that's a hazard, stuff on the staircase, for example. Expired items from the pharmacy, whether prescription or not, to prevent accidental ingestion. You want to get rid of that 10 to 20% that clutter our lives, and almost all of us have it.
This is probably an impossible question.
Go ahead.
But how long should you start ahead? Because I mean, just thinking about the chemicals, the prescriptions in the cabinet. What do you do with them? You have to think about that. You can't throw them in the toilet. That's not allowed. You can't give them away. You have to get rid of them, and it takes time. How long would this process take if you were, let's say, a normal person with not like extraordinary amounts of things, but a normal client?
Well, if we're talking this age group of seniors, quite often, we become a little slower than we used to be, and I usually find that if you give them a year, they'll get through it. But I've moved people in 6 weeks. It's much more intense.
Yeah, Amy mentioned that in the beginning of
you can do that.
Starting early.
Right. You have to start early. And
well, and this is precisely why at Eastwick
Yeah.
Village we bring Helen in to do these seminars, because most people have no idea where to start. They're completely overwhelmed. I'm talking with them about, first of all, making the decision to make a move. That's huge in and of itself. Now they say, but, what am I going to do with all this stuff? They just literally don't know where to start. And so whenever we have done the downsizing seminar with Helen, it's like a standing room only crowd, because this is everyone's #1 issue. Okay. Once they make the decision, okay, we need to move out of this place, then the realization sets in, And some people cannot physically do the work, and then they need to hire someone, Helen or someone else, who can come in and literally make arrangements to have a dumpster in the front yard, take the stuff that's going to Salvation Army, get the stuff together that's going to be sold or donated or whatever. Some people just physically can't do it. Others are able to do it, but they don't know where to start. And what I find is people, when they first hear about downsizing, they think, I have to do all of this at once. And I really like in your seminar when you talk about, start with the easy stuff. Because right away they go to the 16 photo albums in the basement, and
they go with the hardest.
That's the hardest thing.
Yeah. Oh my! How do I get rid of my?
Why don't we just start with this one drawer?
Because that's probably what you're thinking about the most.
Right.
Sure it is.
Right.
You think about the hardest thing to let go of, and but that's why the method I use is to you think about all the easy things to let go of, so it moves their mind into a different slot that says, I can do this. versus, oh no, I can't.
Right, and then if they
that
try
fear
some of
factor.
those things and they're successful with it, it's kind of like, well, this isn't so bad.
They
I
move
can
on.
do this, now I can take the next step. Because when they get to the photos, what happens is they start to look at every picture, and now they remember that day, and then sometimes, you know, there's all emotions that well up, and then everything grinds to a screeching halt because now we're stuck over this.
Now you have tears with no progress.
No.
That's sad.
So that's what sometimes it's the tough love, and Helen is the tough love.
It can be tough love.
We can bring in the hired guns and say, you know,
Sometimes.
because I think that you have a wonderful way with people that you can get them to do things that they don't want to do, but you use humor and your own life experience, and you just have a very nice way of moving people in the direction that they need to go.
Thank you.
You know, whereas if their kids said to them, well, mother, you need to get rid of all this stuff, what do you think happens?
And yes.
Dig in the heels.
Yeah, all of us would. Any
Of
of us
course.
would. If we're told to do something we don't want, we get the arms bent and we're going, yeah, over my dead body.
I have to agree, me too.
Yeah, right. I think we're all that way. And it's what I remind children. I put children, when I have to deal with the kids, and kids, they're often older than I am, but I say to them, you know, what would happen if someone told you you had to get rid of your favorite golf clubs?
Right.
They would just, and they tell me, I said, well, what do you think's happening with your parents? I mean, hello.
Right.
And I give them a way to approach their parents. And there's ways of doing things, but people in this facing this life change at this age can't see through that. They got little blinders, but all of us would. All of us would. And I always treat them as if they'd be my mother. And I lost my parents, and I'd say, okay, if this was my mother, what would I want someone to say to her? How would I want someone to help her? And that's what I do. And after the seminars, people come up to me, and some people are not only thanking me, but others have other questions that they're too embarrassed to ask. And I deal with them all, as many as I can.
It strikes me that we could go on for 3 hours probably
Oh,
and
yeah.
not finish. Let's see if we can come up with maybe 2 types of advice. The first one, how does somebody decide how much space they should even think about downsizing to? Because I know you can get a studio apartment in some places. You could get a 2-bedroom, that's fairly common, or a 1-bedroom. How do you face that decision? Because based on that, you're going to also eventually have to deal with more or less space.
I think from my perspective, unfortunately, a lot of times it comes down to finances. You know, I mean, I think most everybody that I talk to would like to have as big of space as what they could afford.
And a butler.
I guess, yes.
Yes.
What I would say does not work, and I have seen this, if an adult child comes with mom, and mom has lost her husband, so it's just her, but she's living in the family home, and the son or the daughter were looking at an apartment, and they say, well, mom only needs 1 bedroom. Mom, you don't need more than 1 bedroom. It's just you. You know, I feel so bad when that happens. I mean, I understand.
Because what do you say at that point?
I can't say anything
Right.
except, you know, to...
I wish they weren't saying that.
Well, yeah. and sometimes I'll turn to the mother and say, you know, they mean well.
Right.
Because they do. But
She needs to analyze her life, right?
Right. This just goes back to they're telling her what to do. You know, now it's role reversal, which the parent does not like that role reversal to begin with.
Oh,
It's very
absolutely.
demeaning. But
Can that
now
poison the whole well here?
it
the whole
can, and
process?
that's my job then to turn that around, because that isn't going to help anybody.
Right.
And so, you know, when you talk about space, unfortunately, most people don't really often have the luxury of being able to say, do I want a 1-bedroom or a 2? I mean, a lot of times it does come down to what can they afford. And then, I mean, yes, to some degree, how much space do
Because
I
that second
need or
bedroom
we
could be more
need?
than just another person. What if they do photography their whole life and they'd like to have a room for
Exactly.
that, or
And that's the
whatever,
kind of
or a
thing-
knitting room, or
right.
I don't know.
That's what I talk to people about. You know, and usually one of the good, I think, good questions that I will ask people is, where do you spend the most time in your home right now? Because they say, well, I have a 4-bedroom house. I couldn't possibly live in a 2-room apartment. But when I ask them, where do you spend most of your time? They say, well, the kitchen and
the family room.
And the family room.
Right, of course.
Not the formal dining room, not the formal living room, and yet they're counting this space as space that they need. You know why? Because it's full of stuff.
There's stuff in there.
So of course I need all those rooms. It's full of stuff. Well, you don't need a dining room table that seats 12 people if you live in a retirement community. You don't need a formal living room for entertaining. In fact, when was the last time that you actually entertained in your formal living room? You know, in a nice way, I try to get people to see that, well, you're right. I really only live in these 2 rooms. Well, then let's recreate those 2 rooms here. How
And for
could
the
we make
amount
that
probably
work?
that they could pay for that second bedroom, they could rent a room in a restaurant several times a year.
That's
and
exactly.
they could have 50 people
well,
there.
the reality, most retirement communities have a space that residents can use. So again, that's part of my job to point that out. And then they say, oh, okay.
I can
so
do that
I
then.
could have Thanksgiving dinner over there. It doesn't have to be in my apartment because, of course, it wouldn't fit. So, I mean, that's kind of the first step. And then the next step is, you know, now how much stuff am I going to have to get rid of in order to fit in this space? And when you said the re-choose, I really like that, because something that I've often said to people is walk through your house with a sticky pad and look at your furniture now. We're just talking about furniture. What things would you buy all over again? What pieces do you love and you use and you really want to keep those, and put a sticky note on that, as opposed to every single thing that you have in your house? I mean, do you really need 4 bedroom sets anymore? No, of course not.
Right.
You know.
I mean, I had a 4-bedroom house and no room for guests. I mean, just because they have a 4-bedroom house doesn't mean it's being used.
They're called
Exactly.
bedrooms, but
Exactly. Like right now, I have an 830 square foot apartment, and I have 2 bedrooms, but I'm already looking at 1 bedroom. And what Amy is saying is so true. I'm looking at where I spend most of my time, but I have a business, just like if an elderly person had a hobby. So where's the business going to go if I eliminate the 2nd bedroom?
and then you have more room because you've actually designated and designed it to fit what you like to do.
Right. So I've started letting go of furniture, and she's right. You have to start with the big pieces. And what I tell people is you need to have a spiral notebook, and you should start down room by room and make a list of the big pieces you have to have with you, or life isn't worth living. You go up to a high level, and then the pieces that you'll be glad to get rid of. So your yeses and your nos. And then everything else falls in a maybe category.
Okay.
So you have to start analyzing and looking at who you are and what you want. Then the issue of where will it go becomes also a factor, but not before you decide. So then you have to look at options. If you really have a handmade carved dining room set table, and you know you can't take it, and you wish you could, now what do we do?
Okay.
And then I offer options, as Amy would if she had, you know. That's the whole point.
The
work through it.
other question that I had